So it's 1 o'clock, time to get started. Thank you everyone who's joining us here today. Excited to have you all here. We are discussing a very important topic here, accelerating enterprise modernization, AI, and cybersecurity, a very relevant topic in today's times. But before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. We will be taking questions in chat throughout the presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. As I said, there is a poll out there, a fun trivia. If you feel like it, please go ahead and answer the questions. We will be answering to those questions in the presentation itself. And then lastly, the meeting is going to be recorded. So along with the deck, the meeting recording is going to be published right after the session ends. Okay, so let's get started. I'm Soumya Padmanabhan, Vice President of MERP Systems. I handle technical delivery and business development. Very excited to have you all join us here today for this session. Let's quickly cover the agenda. So I'm going to be doing brief introductions, going to keep it very short because there's a lot to cover here today. Then we will have the opening keynote from Dustin. He's going to be covering about the new strategies and initiatives from Microsoft in AI and cybersecurity. We're also going to be hearing from Marion and Rebecca Buchon. Marion Carter is going to be representing CDC, sharing the CDC story of how they modernize their enterprise fellowship management system. And then Rebecca Buchon is going to be telling us the USGS story, where they modernized their USGS operations. And she's also going to be sharing what new things they have planned on their side. The last 10 minutes are dedicated to questions, but again, you don't have to wait until then. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat as and when you have them. Okay, doing introductions, we have an elite panel of speakers here, starting with Dustin Hodges. Dustin is the principal solutions engineer in Microsoft Federal Space. He has years of experience building AI solutions, consulting on cybersecurity for federal enterprise clients. He comes with deep technical skills and years of experience. So thank you, Dustin, for joining us here today. Then we have Rebecca Buchon. She's a senior scientist in USGS. Rebecca also was instrumental in the USGS space's modernization journey. So excited to hear what she has to share with us here today. Marion Carter, she is Deputy Director of the Center of Disease Controls and Prevention, CDC, and she's going to be sharing the CDC modernization story with us. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick overview of MERP Systems in just 60 seconds. We are Microsoft certified solution partners in data and AI. We operate out of Herndon, Virginia. We have a whole bunch of certifications and contracts that allow us to operate in the federal and the state government space. Our biggest footprint is in the federal and the state government space, but we're also expanding into the commercial side, nonprofit, and tribal nations. What we specialize in is digital system transformation, but rather than going over every single detail in here, if I really have to speak about what MERP is best at doing, we are best at solving problems and building solutions that drive operational results. We focus on digital transformation, modernizing legacy systems, age-old systems, automating processes, and AI being the center of all the discussions today. That is where we specialize in. Now, this slide probably looks a little busy to you all, but this is our ecosystem. The top two tiers is where we operate mostly from. We are a strong believer in low-code platforms because that gives us the capability to accelerate solutions and delivery. Power Platform and Dynamics 365 give us the capability to do incremental modernization. Now, when you talk about modernization, it doesn't have to be handled as a big giant problem. You can always solve it incrementally using an agile approach. So that is where Power Platform and Dynamics 365 are most helpful. We complement the solutions with pro-code solutions using Azure services, and of course, AI being the top center of all the conversations today. That is key in every discussion here. Now, if you've already responded to the chat, here is where you get the answers. What does MERP stand for? Well, it is our founder, Prem Nair's name spelled backwards. You can always depend on Prem to come up with out-of-the-box ideas. MERP was recently featured on the Microsoft website for our work with Washington State Gambling Commission. Our modernization story was published there. The original estimate for that modernization was 4 years, and we managed to get that completed in 18 months. That's our flagship project. You can read more about our story at that link here when you get the deck. Lastly, we have 10 accelerator solutions published in the Microsoft App Store space. And this slide here talks about all the details of these accelerator solutions, starting from grants management, compliance, AI claims processing, investigations. But I'd like to highlight 3 very critical solutions in here that are very relevant during this time. Project management, we have an AI-driven solution that allows us to migrate Project Online, which is deprecating next month, into a Power Platform solution. Additionally, we have ServiceNow and Salesforce replatforming solutions that allow these solutions to be migrated into Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. Okay, most importantly, why are we meeting today? Why are we having this discussion today, right now? That's because there are 3 critical driving factors. Number 1, the Microsoft GSA AI deal expires next month. So if your organization is looking to drive AI initiatives, this is the time to act now. Second, this year has had the record allocation for modernization. This is the federal IT budget. So modernization for sure has to be top of your priority list. And then most importantly, the Executive Order 14409 mandates AI and cyber enhancements in all federal agencies. So keeping all these initiatives in mind, we have designed this session to address many of these questions that you are dealing with in your day-to-day life. Now, here is where I transfer over to Dustin. Dustin, over to you.
Great, thanks so much. I can request the slides here, so I'll have to let you know to move forward. So just legal notices, obviously, just for the sake of the recording and everything. Don't want to spend a lot of time here, but today's intent is to give you information about kind of current state, where things are, and ensure that we're able to give you everything that we can on that current state. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So when we're looking at this, the frontier transformation for the U.S. government, kind of what does that mean? What are we talking about from that perspective? So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. AI ambition exceeds those operational readiness, right? So when we think about keeping pace with the private sector, looking across the government, looking at mandates, a lot of the government is planning to have, and deploy AI agents by 2027. A lot of the government is already in process with those, and we're even having those production running pilots going on right now as well, right? And those numbers may have changed, but as we continue this forward, right, we know this is a focus overall. So if we go to the next slide here. The mission demands are really kind of outpacing current capacity, right? So we think about the flood of information, the new capabilities that are coming out, the struggles and things that you have to keep in mind as government organizations haven't changed, right? You have those core components around, cyber threats that you need to make sure you're addressing or taking care of and monitoring for, looking at that abilities to strengthen that competitiveness around those private sector agencies. How do we get the best talent? These are challenges you're seeing across the board with institutionalizing that trustworthiness of governance and data, right? So as we look across these different aspects of things, ensuring that we're able to address those, knowing that those things are available and out there for every government organization. So we'll go to the next slide. So when we think about that frontier transformation in government, what does that kind of look like, and what are some of those core principles that you're looking to focus on as we move forward? So thinking about a secure, resilient, and mission-ready government, right? So making sure you can defend against those persistent threats, making sure that you can sustain those operations, and you're able to give that, secure end to end when you're looking at leveraging mission data to ensure that you're giving those outcomes. Being able to govern in a sustainable way that is also operational, right? So making sure that you're able to prioritize those resources, and ensure that you're delivering in a way that matters most to the citizens that you're supporting. Seamless integration, right? So, people are expecting, as the agentic space continues to grow, that it becomes kind of that core lever to help eliminate some of that additional process debt, and really refine that improvement as we go forward, to make things more simple, and leverage the power of those tools to ensure that they're able to get the outcomes they need in your support for them. Obviously, mission ready for the data, making sure it's compliant, meeting all of those different backgrounds and things that are in place to ensure that the confidence around that audit ready and defendable and scalable solution, that you've continued to do for the years. And really the last piece, right? Looking at that modern tools for a more effective workforce. So we think about agentic AI, being able to offload some of those repetitive tasks, being able to scale those scarce resources you have as there are, budget cuts and constraints that are coming in, and more activities necessarily being added to the plate as well. How do we get to where we can deliver those things, to be able to meet the mission for the end users and then the general population, while also, not burning out the people, ensuring that we have the time and the budget that we have, we can optimize to be able to get the most outcome from that. So we'll go to the next slide here. When we think about how the frontier transformation works, this is really going to be a focus, that it is really going to be a cycle as well. So, the difference between really just agencies experimenting with AI and being frontier really comes down to this combination of intelligence and trust. Obviously, as we look across this, organizations are adding in new AI tools. They want to be able to do some of that experimentation, but to really make it real, having repeatable mission outcomes is really going to be that place. And intelligence alone isn't enough to be able to do that, right? Having to be able to do that at scale with trust is really that accelerator, and being able to have that continuous loop of improvement as we're interjecting these agentic workflows and things into the processes, having a diverse capability around models and openness to the solutions. But again, being able to deliver that intelligence that you're working with and that trust that you can go continue to support is going to be a key for that. So we go to the next slide here. We think about your unique intelligence is what really powers the agents. So, having a unified view of your organization, your government processes, how your employees work, your knowledge sources, right? This is where your IQ as an organization comes in and is really valuable as we integrate those into that agentic space, because that's really the great capabilities that are there. Now, when we think about this holistically and how this goes in, if we'll go over to the next slide, integrating that from a concept of your people having your agents and your IQ all together in one place, and having that security bubble around that is really where that goal in front is. Many organizations through the OneGov offer obviously are using some tools like M365 Copilot today, but this is more that higher level look of, as an end user, I'm able to interact with agents to be able to ask questions that is leveraging the Microsoft IQ. And when I say that, it's really looking at, how do your employees work, how your business operates, or how your organization operates, and then also curated knowledge to help kind of fill gaps for those different roles and the type of work that you all are doing. Having the space to have those things not only be just one-to-one conversational interactive, but also with the introduction of autonomous actions so that you can offload some of those work pieces to get things started. That's really where that key is going to come in as we go down this journey and as we're looking to leverage these capabilities. So if we go ahead and go now to the next slide. So when intelligence is shared, right, innovation spreads. So, frontier organizations, they don't scale AI by locking it inside the small experiment, right? Being able to scale that out so that it can really be leveraged broadly across the organization, leveraging the IQ that's there and being able to put that directly in the flow of work for people is what's going to be the most important as we continue down this journey. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Agents are becoming ubiquitous, right? The word agents has so many meanings. It's repeated so many times. I've said it a number of times within this presentation, right? We're entering that state where it's no longer really that experimental thing. They're starting to pop up everywhere, and becoming kind of a foundational layer of how work gets done. It's being embedded in applications, it's automating workflows, it's collaborating with employees and other things to be able to get work done. So if we go ahead and go to the next slide, I think it's estimated 1.3 billion agents are going to exist and be out there in use by 2028. Maybe that's even more. So when we think about that, is your organization ready? Can you track and monitor all the agents? Do you know what's going to be happening within those? How do you put guardrails up? Are agents protected? Do they have the right access that they need, or do they have too much? How do you get through that? And could there be that opportunity for sensitive data leaks? So let's go to the next slide really quick. This whole thing is also compounded, right? When the impact of those agents sprawl across, solutions as a service, endpoint related agents, as well as cloud agents. There's so many different things coming across, and how do you get a handle on, just cracking the door, but making sure you're not necessarily opening the floodgates for all of these things. Now, on the Microsoft side, generally don't like to talk about product capabilities, but obviously, in the holistic piece of this, understanding what that is. You can go to the next slide, sorry. Microsoft Agent 365 is that plane, that control plane for agents. So when we think about the vision and how we're leveraging tool sets and capabilities, this is where we're integrating the visibility across the agentic space into a tool set that can be it's going to be in the flow of work that you have today. So if we go to the next space, we're not going to drive super deep into this with today's time frame, but understanding here that as we look at M365 and that control plane, right, we have three kind of core pillars. Observing, so do we have visibility into everything? And this is focused not only on just the M365 side of things that are part of Microsoft, but also agents and tools and other things that are coming from AWS if you're leveraging that, if you're using third-party solutions that are outside of Microsoft, recognizing that all of these things need that single plane of visibility. That's where this is going. Having the ability to govern and establish guardrails for those agents and the users of those agents in a centralized way, so you can control that and ensure that it's being done in a safe manner, as well as lastly, being able to secure it. How do you protect against it comprehensively? So looking across the board of all the different capabilities, how are you going to be able to have those strong protections in place to ensure that you're able to safeguard data and defending against any type of threats and vulnerabilities as you move forward. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, when we think about this, we think about that ecosystem, right? It's not just the Microsoft stuff that we're looking across. How do we pull in everything from all these partners and other solutions you're using? How do we manage it in a centralized way that's repeatable so that as we're leveraging these other parts of our products and our parts of capabilities that we're using in different areas of the business or in the different areas of the departments, how do we centralize it in a way that we can ensure they can have the tools that they need for the specific purpose, but also ensure that it's done in a repeatable and a secure manner to do that? So we think about this, right? The best way to manage agents is to extend that infrastructure, use that you use already today for managing your users. So obviously, many of you are using the core M365 products for productivity. You may be using Copilot today, looking at first-party agents within the Microsoft ecosystem, but also ensuring that you're expanding those out, but being able to apply and leverage Microsoft Defender, Microsoft Entra from an identity perspective as your primary identity, looking at things like Intune for device management and Purview. If you're leveraging the M365 stack today, you have all of these things in place, extending that out so that you're taking advantage of all of the work that you've already done. You're not reinventing the wheel, but you're leveraging those things that you've put in place and extending it out is really what that concept is about. And being able to take those things and apply it so that you have that consistency across the board without having to start over or start doing crazy integrations with other systems and creating new intertwined pathways to make those things work. So really the key here, though, we think about that holistic vision, right? We're trying to empower every employee with AI in the flow of work. All right, so a lot of the things we just talked about are more about that backend infrastructure and how do I actually, go about protecting all of these things so end users can use it. At the end of the day, your end users aren't thinking about all those things as much. They're really thinking about, when I go in and do work every day, how am I able to leverage these capabilities to do things more effectively, efficiently, and get the things out the door that I need to do? So having those backend pieces helps simplify that story, because it brings those pieces of information, those protections. It gives them that level of security to be able to give those tools to them to integrate those into the true flow of work day to day as they're working. Right. Adopting agents at scale without visibility obviously introduce risks. So when we think about the conversations we have about how are we going to manage and do those things, if we go ahead and go to the next slide, it's really around, frontier organizations ensuring that confidence at scale. And it talks about those same pillars we talked about earlier, but how do we integrate that governance, observability, and security in a way that we can continue doing those forward? And then go ahead and go to the next slide here, right? That trusted scale of AI, that's where the importance comes in, right? So when we talked about all those other pieces, having this be part of that integrated core M365 solution, having those unified cyber operations, making sure that we have that government grade compliance that comes along with those product sets in those fields, and then that comprehensive governance, being able to ensure that we're able to enforce that compliance and responsible use with audible and transparent controls, right? Those are really the key pieces there to ensure that you're able to really validate and have that trust that you need. So going back to that initial kind of conversation we had around trust as well as intelligence, this is really where we're bridging those gaps together, and those are the capabilities that are going to be focused on that Agent 365 rollout and enablement here in the near future. So thank you all.
Great. I'll take it from there. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Marion Carter with the Division of Workforce Development at CDC. Happy to be here to share some information about our Enterprise Fellowship Management System and experience transitioning to the Power Platform. So before we begin, just a few disclaimers. We do currently contract with MERP Systems to implement the work I'll describe. And also, I am not an IT professional or technical expert, so some questions you have I may not be able to answer, might need to punt. And just want to acknowledge my colleagues Ray, Jerry, and Keith for their work on this and leadership in the space, and certainly to Bijou of MERP for the invitation. Thank you. So quickly, I'm just going to give you the bottom line up front on this, and if you bear with me, I've adopted heavily a hiking analogy for this presentation. So this is our trail map and destination. So you can click to please, Somia. Yeah. So basically, our Enterprise Fellowship Management System is fairly complex, and we really hit the limits of our prior IT platform. And we were able to adopt the Power Platform. Transitioning to it was a bit of a lift, but at this point, it's really serving us well, and we have real confidence that it's going to keep serving us going forward. So that's loosely the arc I will be describing today. So a little bit on our context, you understand kind of what we're trying to do, our programmatic context. Next. So within the CDC, the Division of Workforce Development, where I work, is unique in that we directly manage a lot of fellowship and training programs. We don't manage all CDC fellowship programs or trainings by any stretch of the imagination, but we manage a lot of the larger and better known ones. Some are listed here, and they're all largely intended to help train and prepare new early career talent into the public health workforce, right? So for this talk, go back, please. Not quite. Sorry. So for this talk, what's important to know is that each program really has its own way of operating, right? So some programs have host sites that apply to match with fellows. Most of them are 2-year full-time commitments. Some programs are run only 2 months. Some they vary in their technical area. We have one that's focused on laboratory science, another one that's focused on health economics, right? They're on different schedules, right? So they open for applications at different times of the year. So just in sum, these are all they're unique thing. This isn't like sort of one system with different tracks. These are all unique systems that are operating together. Next, please. So what EFMS, our Enterprise Fellowship Management System, does for us, this is I'm going to describe a little bit of what it does for us. You can get a sense of the corresponding IT needs and what's going on here. So for 10 fellowship or training programs, next, it involves lots of application submission, right? So this is like resumes, transcripts, personal statements, et cetera, everything you could imagine that may come in. They're also, for many programs, host site submissions. So again, information on those organizations and project proposals and all these kinds of things. A lot of work on the back end around application review, matching, eligibility screening, quality interview, these sorts of things. So a lot of activity there too. And finally, there's, for some programs, a fair bit of fellow or trainee tracking that occurs in the system. So that's all it's told. It's a fairly complex, excuse me. So just wanted to outline sort of 4 of the complexity factors that help define our IT needs. So again, the programs are designed and operated differently. We have a significant amount of sensitive and at least very, personally identifiable data and information. There's a lot of external facing needs as well as internal process needs, right, that the system must do for us. And there's a need for both a lot of program management, right, like candidates are actually sort of, moved through the system, as well as data tracking needs across the program lifecycle, right? So in short, what we need in any system is a high need for customization. We need really solid IT security. We need back and front end features that are important to us as the back end features, right? So the demands on both. And we need a system that can serve program managers and the fellows and others that apply, as well as our informaticians and data analysts on the back end, So if you'll work with me here, I wanted to sort of consider EFMS sort of our program's sort of feet. Okay, that's what our programs we stand and run, or to use my analogy, hike on here. Feet are, complex anatomical structures. So we'll just sort of run with that. Okay, so next. So what happened? Basically, we found ourselves with these hiking boots, totally worn out, right? They're not able to protect our feet anymore or support them for healthy walking. Next, please. So there are a few of the key pain points that we had with our prior platform. It really did serve us well, but at first it was really too customizable and decentralized. Like we really actually lost control of the architecture. This was not entirely the fault of the platform's problem, but the design, facilitated that particular problem. Second, the data extraction was too hard and actually contained some errors, right? So the system, it really prioritized program management over sort of the data use and features that we needed. And so we really needed both to work out. And third, the vendor provided a relatively niche solution, which was custom, and it ran into some security limitations on the federal space that they could not overcome, right? So basically, these shoes were worn out. So what do we do? What do you do when your shoes are worn out? You get a new pair of hiking boots, right? So we did an analysis of alternatives and decided to seek the Microsoft Power Platform as the new platform for EFMS. And it had been approved for use, right? As part of the GovCloud infrastructure and licensing, we had access available, to all CDC staff. So, and certainly a renewed emphasis on data modernization within CDC really facilitated this change. So breaking in the new boots was not easy, right? First, we could not just let our programs, pause while we did this transition. So we had to reconfigure it all while still operating. So if you can click, Soumya, thank you just for the first one there. So that was complicated, right? And second, programs saw this as a real opportunity to improve and change, right? And they leaned into this. So there were lots of, changes we had to review, and process, and many requests like, okay, the new system could do this. How about that? What about this? So at one point we had hundreds of things on the change log, hundreds of things on our enhancement log, and sort of managing the expectations around there was important, because obviously as any situation, we were on a fixed budget. We couldn't say yes to everything. And our own internal capacity was somewhat limited still at that point. So at this point, we were leaning heavily on our partnership with MERP to get through this. So Now we're on our way now. And in general, programs are really operating smoothly. You can click a couple. We've successfully processed thousands of submitted applications now in the last couple of years. We surveyed various external applicants on their experience. It was overwhelmingly positive. And that was great. The internal users at CDC, we hear there's been, required a lot of behavior change when you ask a large group of people to shift from one system to another for their main, operations. But we've managed that well. Folks are doing the work, doing things more independently all the time. So we're well on our way. And then the backend data are still, are still complex to access, but that is, again, not something the system itself can, fix. I mean, when the underlying complexity of what we're trying to do is just a fact, but new solutions are opening up all the time, and we're optimistic about that. And it's really afforded some features we couldn't even dream of before that the Power Platform could facilitate. And working within the Microsoft product, like we've seen some real benefits, right, of being able to link directly with Teams. We integrate interviewing capability and scheduling right in the system, right? That was amazing. Or with customer voice, we're now pursuing that as our survey platform instead of having to build custom surveys, functionality, that kind of thing, among other points of leverage. And every day there at CDC, there are other opportunities for training in Power Apps, Power Automate, certainly Power BI been around for a while now. And that's all great because it's helping us reduce our risk by being able to operate also in the system, right? But it's a shared platform that we can really learn about. And in general, we can operate with a longer horizon, having moved to the Power Platform, right? We're not as concerned about the system's ability to, keep data secure or be FedRAMP approved or these sorts of things. We can generally all be more confident, about this investment and that it'll last, right? And we won't need to find a new sort of brand new boots anytime soon, right? So just to wrap up, I mean, it means, we can be more future looking, right? So like what kind of new trailheads do we want to visit? Certainly, speaking to the prior speaker, AI is front of mind. We have different ideas to how AI can be integrated on the front end for external users as well as the back end for our internal users to facilitate various processes and such. We're looking at different ways to introduce additional automation. We have a high priority on some of the reporting functions, data visualization. Again, Power BI can be integrated right in there, and we're kind of tightening up some of those connections, and really taking advantage of the broader dataverse. I think that'll really benefit us going forward. So. And this last slide, this just reiterating what I said at the front. Again, this is generally the gist of our story. And I just really want to thank the MERP team for their expertise and support throughout this transition. They've been a really excellent partner in helping us realize this change. So with that, thank you very much. And I'll pass it over to my colleague in the USGS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead to the next slide. So good afternoon, and thanks for inviting me to speak today. My name is Rebecca Bushon. I'm a senior scientist at the USGS, and today I'm going to be presenting on how the USGS is modernizing operations using the Power Platform. Next slide. So first, I just want to start by introducing you to the USGS. So the USGS is the nation's Earth, Water, Biology, and Civilian Mapping Agency within the Department of the Interior. The USGS delivers foundational data and expertise to regulators, managers, policymakers, and the public about an array of environmental, resource, and public safety issues. So we currently have approximately 8,000 employees in all 50 states, plus Guam and Puerto Rico, in almost 400 distinct facilities. Next slide. So there's a lot of reasons why we would want to modernize our operations, and I'm just going to mention a few here. The USGS produces a lot of information, both scientific and operational data. And we have a lot of disparate applications. So some of these applications were built by people who are no longer with the USGS, or they were built on platforms that have reached end of life. Scalability is often an issue, especially with applications that have not yet been migrated to modern cloud-based platforms. And the cost for maintaining these legacy systems is high and requires a lot of support. And over the past year, the majority of our IT support was unified to the department level, so we lost a significant amount of expertise. Many of our processes involve manual data entry, and it's often duplicative across our applications. We have a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of versions of those spreadsheets, which is a risk to data integrity. So all of these issues can cause gaps in compliance and reporting, and they jeopardize our continuity of operations. And we now have more modern cloud-based tools available to us, thus allowing us to incorporate more AI functionality, which is now being pushed through executive and secretarial orders. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to 2018, which is where our journey began. So at this time, the USGS just released a new directive for all 500 of our laboratories across the country to implement a quality management system. So this included each lab having to comply with a set of 70 requirements. So many of us on the quality management team were laboratory scientists earlier in our careers, and we quickly realized what a huge lift this would be for each lab. So we had an idea, and that was to develop a laboratory tracking system to make meeting those requirements easier. We also needed a better way to look at the effectiveness of the QMS from a high level. But this really wasn't just about complying with the directive. We wanted to add value to our lab operations and create efficiencies and make their information more traceable and reproducible. Next slide. So we started doing market research in 2019 to look at various platforms and products. And we reached out to our Microsoft representatives and were put in contact with the Microsoft Global Black Belt team. So on the left of the slide here is the presentation that I gave to Microsoft explaining our ideas. And they introduced us to the Power Platform. And they even took it a step further and created a laboratory tracking Power app as a proof of concept. So then together with Microsoft, we presented the idea and demoed that Power app to USGS leadership. And we got really positive feedback and the approval to move forward. So what they said was, let's try this out for QMS. And if it works, oh, can you go back 1 second? Okay, try this out for QMS. And if it works, we'll consider building or modernizing other apps using this platform. So what we found that was when people can see what that solution might look like, they're more likely to stand behind it. And they're also more likely to come up with other processes that could benefit from a similar system. So we went on the hunt to see who we could get to build this for us. This took a long time, but after much research and a few contracting nightmares, we made the decision to move forward with MERP systems. Okay, next slide. In 2022, we finally got our contract in place with MERP and started building QTrack. So QTrack's a model-driven Power app that uses Dataverse as the backend database and integrates with SharePoint for document storage. It has hundreds of Power Automate flows, and it includes Power BI for reports and dashboards. So this application is managed at the bureau level, and it's available for use by all 500 of our labs. So within QTrack, we have 5 modules, and they cover things like document management, equipment inventory and maintenance, laboratory training records, quality assessments, and corrective actions. And within QTrack, we have built-in security controls and permissions that are based on the user's role. And these controls will dictate what information users can see and then who can edit specific information. Next slide. So once we were able to award the contract, development and deployment happened very quickly. So the project kicked off in June of 2022, and then QTrack went live less than a year later. So with each of our projects with MERP, they always start with an in-depth discovery period where we go through every detail of the requirements, and we essentially develop a blueprint for the application. So the actual development and user acceptance testing, which included approximately 10 3-week sprints, took only 8 months. And then once we deployed the application, we've been able to make enhancements on a regular basis as we learn what works and what doesn't work in our labs. And if you can advance the slide. Okay. And then during this time, our USGS emergency management program became aware of what we were building of QTrack. And they began also working with MERP to create a similar application that we call EMTrack. So this application took only 10 months from kickoff to go live, and it's now being used to track emergency response efforts, sending notifications to relevant stakeholders, facilitating after action reviews, and tracking corrective actions. Next slide. So in the meantime, all of our USGS employees had access to standard Power Platform tools. So this slide here gives you a sense for the diversity and breadth of applications that have been built across USGS. It also shows how the platform is being used for all kinds of different business, administrative, and even scientific purposes. So with the exception of some of our mission critical apps like QTrack and EMTrack, most of these applications were created with the standard version or license of Power Platform and were built by USGS employees. Next slide. For QTrack and EMTrack, we took great efforts to provide consistency across the applications. So not only did we use the same contractor for development, but the project teams worked very closely to align our formats, our themes, the names of the buttons, the terminology. And then starting last year, we began modernizing our biggest application yet, which is the Information Product Data System, or IPDS. And again, using MERP for the development. IPDS is a critical bureau-wide app that manages the review and approval of approximately 10,000 scientific information products released to the public each year. The legacy system was built in an on-prem SharePoint environment that had reached end of life this year. So not only were we required to modernize this application, but we had an opportunity here to improve user experience and enhance security. And this application is scheduled to go live this November. So familiarity across applications not only benefits the people who are maintaining or supporting the apps because it reduces or eliminates the learning curve with each new application, but we believe that by creating a consistent look and feel, the training and adoption of the apps becomes much easier for our end users. And while I don't have KPIs or metrics that I can share at this point, I can talk a little bit about how we measure success. So we're constantly monitoring adoption rates and soliciting feedback, much of which has been very positive. When changes or updates are needed to these apps, we can implement them quickly due to the nature of the low-code platform. And this makes people very happy. So many of our legacy applications we can't update because we've lost the support personnel or the platforms are outdated. We're also seeing a huge time savings. We're letting these applications do a lot of the work for us, and we're building requirements right into the applications. And then finally, we now have access to data that we previously had a hard time obtaining, and that's a huge win for our organization. Okay, next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about where we're going from here. So now that we have easier access to our data, it's sparked an effort to repurpose that data for new ideas and new initiatives. So here's an example. Now that we have all of our laboratory information in QTrack, we were able to repurpose that data into a new tool called the Laboratory Capabilities Dashboard, and we were able to make that available to all USGS employees. So this is a Power BI dashboard that pulls information out of QTrack so that users can see what equipment each laboratory has and where that equipment's located. They can see methods and activities that the lab runs. They can see facility information, who they work with, external partners. This was an easy dashboard to develop, and it was with data we already had, and it's a huge value to the organization. We're starting to use other Microsoft products such as Dynamics 365 and integrating them with Power Platform tools. We just recently kicked off a project this year for the hydrologic instrumentation facility. So this facility provides hydrologic equipment to USGS offices and other external agencies to support water monitoring efforts nationwide. And so the operation at the HIF includes sales, rentals, calibrations, QA/QC of instruments. It involves warehouse operations, billing, customer support. Their legacy system is past its end of life and it has significant technical debt. So they are moving forward with Microsoft Dynamics 365 with our trusted partners at MERP leading that development. Next, I want to just quickly provide an example of how we're planning to modernize a science project. So the conservation, if you can go back, please. The Conservation Efforts Database is an online data repository for habitat conservation actions, and it allows data collection from external partners. So the current system that they have in place uses a SQL database, ArcGIS, and some Python coding. And due to significant staff loss, it's unable to be maintained, and the current structure can't be scaled for any new efforts. So the project team decided to move forward with migrating the data into Dataverse and converting the existing web pages into Microsoft Power Pages, all of which will enhance user experience, it will allow for scalability, and it will reduce the burden of maintenance. And this project is estimated to kick off next year. And then finally, just you can stay on the slide, I wanted to mention how we're using Microsoft Copilot Studio to accelerate adoption of our QTrack Power App for laboratories. So we currently have only 2 people that support QTrack by providing training, developing resources, and assisting the approximately 2,000 users. So what we did is we built a QTrack support agent in Copilot Studio and incorporated 36 knowledge sources. So end users can just go to the agent, ask their questions, and they'll immediately get step-by-step instructions and direct links to our original source materials. This was super easy to develop, and it's going to have a lot of benefits for our end users. So just finally, just wanted to say we're continually looking for ways to incorporate AI functionality, not only to help with adoption rates and training of these applications, but also to improve our workflows and analyze data. Okay, last slide. I just wanted to bring up a couple of lessons learned from our journey. So first, I want to mention governance, which is extremely important. This was lacking at the beginning of our journey, and it led to some issues. So we had a lot of internally developed applications that were being stored in our default environment. They used SharePoint as a backend, where maybe Dataverse would have been more appropriate. These apps were owned by individuals and not service accounts, and those people left the organization. And we had applications break because they weren't testing updates in a development or test environment first. So we leaned very heavily on Microsoft documentation and came up with the governance tiers that are shown on the slide to help our developers internally. So at the bottom of the pyramid is personal productivity. So these are generally small applications, maybe only 1 or 2 people using them. And it's probably okay to have it in the default environment. It's probably also okay to not have a service account. But as you move up the pyramid, you have more users, more complexity, more information that's critical to the mission. And so there's more things to consider. So for our most critical mission applications, we use 4 separate environments. We also use service accounts, and we make sure we have all of our data in Dataverse. Second, the Department of Interior invested in premium Power App licenses for all employees in 2025. When you get the premium licenses, you also get Dataverse, you get premium connectors, you get better security. So before this time, before 2025, it was up to each office and each project to procure licenses for people using their apps, and it was really a huge barrier. And to avoid spending that little extra money, people become very clever with lots of workarounds and shortcuts, and that ultimately might make the data less secure and lead to some other issues down the road. So we feel that it's really important to have the right tools and the right guardrails in place early. The third lesson learned, I wanted to mention that we started a Power Platform community of practice in 2023. This was a really great way to get all of our Power Platform users in USGS together and provide them with updates from Microsoft, like new features that are available, and then also to provide reminders about the governance. We invited several speakers to demo applications that they built, and this was really valuable because it sparked a ton of ideas. We also found that people had a lot of questions, and there was no single office or person within the agency to ask those questions to. So by setting up this community, we were now able to support each other. The last thing I want to mention is that contracting is hard. Consider setting up a blanket purchase agreement or an IDIQ. We were able to do this. We put a blanket purchase agreement in place in 2025. And it allows anyone in the USGS to make a call to that BPA for any kind of Power Platform development or support for the next 5 years. So this was a huge lift to get this set up, but it has saved a lot of time for project personnel and contracting personnel. And we were able to do this as a single vendor agreement with MERP because the consistency across our applications was something that was really important to us. Next slide. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you want to chat any more about something that I mentioned in the talk. I am always happy to talk about Power Platform. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Dustin, Rebecca, and Marion. I think we all heard three very different perspectives, but the underlying problem was pretty much the same. Fragmented systems, aging legacy systems, having the need to modernize, having the need to drive business outcomes using AI. So the problems remain the same. And federal agencies right now are at a very, very crucial point where all these are not just theory topics, they're quickly moving from experimenting into actually implementing them live. So I hope you all got some good lessons learned. Rebecca, thank you for that. I thought it was really, really helpful. And you got some tips and tricks on how to take this mission forward in your agencies. Now, if there are any questions, this would be a right time to ask them. The Q&A chat is open. I'm gonna take a quick look to see if there's anything else. There's also a poll in here. If you could take the poll, it's going to give us a little bit better sense of what your background is, what kind of problems you all are dealing with in your organization. And then that's going to be helpful for us to then, come up with better sessions and ways to help you drive your mission forward. Are there any other questions? Anything that you'd like to talk about? A few more seconds and then we can call it done. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions unless I'm missing something here. Let me just quickly look at the participant list. All right. I think we're good to go. Well, thank you everyone for joining the session today. If there are any further questions, anything that you think about after you drop off the session, please feel free to ping us directly. There is a quick poll for you to take. Tell us how you thought about the webinar, anything that we could do to improve here. We'd be happy to take that feedback. Thank you for joining. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.